I told my daughter she had nothing to worry about the morning I signed over joint access to my accounts. I told her I knew what I was doing. I told her I was 67 years and had been managing my own money since before her brother was born, and I wasn't about to stop now. I just needed a little help, that was all. A little help. Those words cost me $290,000 and nearly cost me my wife. My name is Leonard. No, wait. My name is Clifford. No. Let me start properly. My name is Rex Halvorsen. I am 68 years old. I spent 33 years as a mechanical engineer with the city of Edmonton, the kind of work where you sign your name to drawings that go into the ground and stay there for 50 years. Bridges, water infrastructure, storm sewer systems running under neighborhoods where kids ride their bikes and nobody thinks about what holds the ground together underneath. I thought about it. It was my job to think about it. I was good at my job. I retired in 2019. My wife Marguerite and I had a house in Glenora, the kind of neighborhood where the elms are old enough that the roots push up the sidewalk squares, and in June the whole street smells like cut grass and something slower and quieter than the rest of the city. We'd lived there since 1997. Marguerite picked it. She walked through the back garden on a gray April afternoon and said, "Rex, if we don't take this house, I will never forgive either of us." We took it. For 26 years that house was the steadiest thing in my life outside of her. Then in the winter of 2021, Marguerite started forgetting things. Small things at first. The kettle she'd left on. The name of the woman from her book club she'd known for 11 years. The day of the week. I told myself everyone did that. I told myself I forgot things too. I told myself a lot of things that winter because the alternative was something I wasn't ready to open. By spring I couldn't tell myself anything anymore. The neurologist at the University of Alberta Hospital was a quiet woman named Dr. Farouk. She had a way of delivering facts slowly, like she understood that a person can only absorb so much at one time, and she wasn't going to rush you past what you needed to sit with. She told us on a Thursday afternoon, vascular dementia, progressive. Marguerite held my hand through the whole appointment and then slept against the car window all the way home on the Whitemud, and I drove every kilometer staring straight ahead, thinking about numbers. I had been thinking about numbers for 2 years by then. Retirement savings, pension income, the cost of memory care in Edmonton, which I had already quietly researched at 3 a.m. more than once. We had enough. We had planned carefully. We had $290,000 in a registered retirement savings account, a defined benefit pension that came in every month without fail, and the house in Glenora, which had appreciated beyond anything I'd allowed myself to expect when we bought it. If I was careful, if I was patient, if nothing went sideways, Marguerite would be looked after, fully looked after, the way she deserved. That was the only thing I needed to hold on to. 3 weeks after Dr. Farouk's office, my son called. His name is Noel Halvorsen. He's 42, lives out in Airdrie, works in commercial real estate. He has his mother's eyes and his own particular talent for entering a room and making it feel like the room had been waiting for him specifically. He called on a Tuesday evening while I was doing dishes and Marguerite was watching her show in the other room, and his voice was warm and careful and certain the way it gets when he has already decided something, and is giving you the courtesy of making it sound like a conversation. "Dad, I've been thinking. You can't do this alone. I know you think you can. I know that's who you are. But Dad, listen, I want to come home for a while, not to visit. To help. Really help. I can work remotely." I stood at the sink with the water running and I didn't say anything for a long moment. And then I said the thing a man says when he has been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and someone offers to take part of it. I said that would mean a great deal to me, son. I want you to understand who I am before I go any further. I am not a man who asks for things. My father was a machinist from Camrose, who believed that a man's worth was measured by what he handled without complaint, and he raised me accordingly. I had been a primary caregiver for Marguerite for 2 years at that point, managing her medications, her appointments at the Glenrose, her good hours and her frightening ones, the nights she woke up not knowing where she was, the mornings she looked at me with absolute clarity, and we were simply us again, just us, the way we'd always been. I had managed all of it, alone, and I had been lonelier doing it than I have words to describe. So when Noel said those words, I let myself feel something I hadn't felt in months. I felt like I might be all right. He stayed at a short-term rental over on 109th Street. Close enough to be at the house in 15 minutes. Far enough that it looked like a man with his own life. He was with us 4 or 5 days a week. He came to Marguerite's appointments, learned the names of her care team, asked the questions I was too tired to hold in my head. He took the insurance calls, the pharmacy runs, the paperwork that had piled up on the corner of the kitchen table and was starting to feel like its own kind of accusation. He sat with Marguerite on her bad evenings when she needed someone there, and I needed 30 consecutive minutes of silence to remember I was still a person. I thanked God for him every night. I am not exaggerating. I literally said the words. Here is what I did not know was happening in the same rooms on the same days. I need you to stop with me for a second before I go any further, because what I'm about to describe, every small thing Noel lifted off my plate, every time he showed up with groceries and a coffee, and that easy grin of his, I need you to hold all of it against one fact I didn't learn until much, much later. He had requested the account information for my RRSP within 10 days of Dr. Farouk's diagnosis. 10 days. He wasn't coming home because his parents needed him. He was coming home because he had looked at a tragedy and seen an opportunity, and the tragedy happened to have my wife's face on it. But I didn't know that. So let me tell you what I saw. Because what I saw was good enough to fool a man who had spent 33 years inspecting the hidden load-bearing structures of things, and believed he could read most situations the same way he read a set of engineering drawings. Around month 4, Marguerite had a very bad stretch. A whole week where she was frightened more than she was present, reaching for people who weren't there, asking me where her sister was. And her sister had passed in 2014. I hadn't slept properly in 3 weeks. I had missed a payment on the utility account. 40 years of bill payments, never once, and I missed one because I simply did not have the space in my head to hold it. Noel came by on a Wednesday evening. He had a folder with him. He sat down across from me at the kitchen table, which was Marguerite's kitchen table, which she had refinished herself in 2003, with a patience I had marveled at, and he set the folder down between us. He said, "Dad, there's something I need to walk you through, and I need you to really hear me." He had this way of speaking, unhurried, like each sentence had been prepared just far enough in advance that it didn't sound prepared. Like a man who had located the precise coordinates of your deepest fears and was handing them back to you, wrapped in concern. He said, "You're 68, Mom is 66. If something happens to you tomorrow, and I'm not trying to scare you, I'm trying to make sure you're protected. What happens to her? The pensions in your name, the RRSPs in your name. If you go without the right structures in place, it takes months before she can access anything. And during those months she's sitting in this house, unable to touch the money that's supposed to be there for her." I let that sit. Every word of it landed exactly where I was most afraid, the way a man lands a punch when he already knows where you're sore. "These are enduring power of attorney documents," he said, opening the folder. "Financial and personal care. It just means I can handle the administrative side completely. The accounts, the pension paperwork, the CRA correspondence. So you can give every bit of yourself to being there for Mom. You're carrying too much, Dad. Let me carry this part." I looked down at the pages. I was running on fumes and love, and the particular kind of exhaustion that doesn't live in your muscles, the kind that seeps down into the layer of your mind where your judgment lives and makes it slow and heavy and harder to trust. The kind that only people who have cared for someone who is leaving them in pieces, a little more each week, really understand. I signed. He had it commissioned by a notary public the next morning. He mentioned it later the way you mentioned the weather. And that night I slept better than I had in 5 months. I thought I had handed something heavy to someone strong enough to carry it. What I had actually done was hand him a key, and he knew exactly which doors it opened. If you've ever been so depleted that you put your name on something you should have read more carefully, if you've ever trusted someone simply because you no longer had the reserves to do otherwise, you already know the room I just walked into. You can already feel the cold. Run the clock forward 22 months. 6 a.m. medications. Appointments at the Glenrose twice a month. Good days where Marguerite would sit at the kitchen table and tell me a story about something that's happened in 1987 like it was yesterday, laughing at the end of it. And I would laugh with her, and for a few minutes we were just us again. Bad days that I won't describe in detail because they belong to her and not to this story. 22 months of keeping myself upright because she needed the one solid thing in her world to stay solid. 22 months of lying awake doing the math. And then came the Sunday that took my life and divided it into before and after. My daughter Blythe had us over for dinner. She lives in Riverbend with her husband Sebastien, who works compliance at one of the downtown banks. TD, quiet man, the kind of person who blends into the wallpaper at a dinner party, and turns out, when you actually need someone, to be the only person in the room worth knowing. Their kids were there, our grandchildren, 9 and 11, tearing around the house in wool socks on the hardwood, crashing into things. Marguerite was in good form. She was wearing the blue cardigan I love her in, and she was laughing at something Noel said across the table, actually laughing, and I watched her and thought, there you are, there she is. Noel was Noel. Generous, loud in the right moments, top of everyone's glass before they asked. He was telling a story about a property deal somewhere out in Cochrane that had everyone smiling. The man at his ease. The man with nothing pressing on his conscience. And then Sebastien's hand found mine under the table. He pressed his phone into my palm without looking at me. 6 words lit up on the screen. Check your TD account right now. 3 more below that, then say you feel sick. I looked up at Sebastien. His face was completely still. Set. The face of a man who had been waiting a long time for the right moment to open something, and had decided that this was it. He gave me one slow nod, the kind that doesn't say anything except trust me and don't ask and trust me. I opened my banking app under the edge of the table. I hadn't looked at this account in months. Noel handled the financial side. That was the arrangement, that was what I'd agreed to. The balance was $14,440. I stared at it. There had been $290,000 in that account, 33 years of it. Every dollar placed there for one woman and one reason. $14,400. Noel was laughing at the end of his own story across the table. Marguerite was smiling along, though I could see from the soft unfocus in her eyes that she had drifted from it 3 sentences back and was somewhere else entirely, somewhere comfortable, somewhere in the past. The grandchildren were shrieking about something down the hall. I put my hand flat on my chest. I said, I don't feel right. I think I need to step outside for a minute. Blythe was up out of her chair before I finished the sentence, the worry on her face completely real, because she didn't know yet. She knew something, I would find out later. She had suspected for weeks, but she didn't know the number. Sebastien went me out to the car, and Noel, my son, my blood, stood in the doorway of his sister's house and called after me with the ease of a man whose hands are spotless. Feel better, Dad. I'll check in on you tomorrow. I sat in Sebastien's car, and the first thought I had was not about me. It was about Marguerite, about the memory care home out in the west end of the city, the one on a quiet crescent near Lessard, the one I had visited twice without telling anyone. The one with the garden and the staff who learned everyone's name in the first week. The place I had spent 2 years saving toward, carefully, every dollar accounted for. Gone. And the man who had taken it was standing in lit doorway, one hand raised, the picture of a devoted son. The truth doesn't come all at once. It comes piece by piece, and every piece breaks something else on the way down. I want you to picture something. A 68-year-old man in the passenger seat of a gray Subaru on a quiet Sunday evening in Edmonton. The sky doing what the sky does here in October, going dark fast, that particular deep blue before the black. The sound of his grandchildren still reaching him faintly from inside the house, and that man looking at $14,000 where 33 years used to be. And not moving, not from calm. I want to be precise about that. I was the furthest thing from calm. I was the stillness you reach when your mind is handed a fact too large to process and simply stops while it works out what it's holding. Sebastien didn't drive me to a hospital. He drove me downtown to his office building, one of those glass towers off Bay Street, up to the 7th floor. Empty on a Sunday evening, our footsteps coming back at us off the floors. I felt, walking through that lobby, like a man being walked somewhere serious and permanent. Which is exactly what was happening. He sat me down. He looked at me the way you look at someone before you say the thing they can't unhear. Rex, he said. And he never called me Rex. It was always Dad from the first Christmas he spent with us 11 years ago. I need you to know that what I'm about to show you has been verified completely. I didn't come to you with a suspicion. I came to you with a record. How long have you known? I asked. 3 months. I let that sit. I didn't get angry. Not yet. Because the look on Sebastien's face told me that those 3 months had cost him his sleep too. Why did you wait? He folded his hands on the desk. Because Blythe needed to be certain before we asked her to accept what her brother had done. And because I needed everything documented before you ever knew a single door was open. I understood him exactly. Then he opened the folder. He started with the withdrawals. 14 months of them. Always between $3,000 and $6,000. Never above the threshold that triggers a FinTrack report. Spread across irregular intervals. Never the same week, never the same amount, variable enough to look like ordinary account activity, disciplined enough to stay well below the line. This has a name, Sebastien said. It's called structuring. It's a federal offense under the Proceeds of Crime Act, completely separate from the fraud itself. I looked at those transactions laid out across his desk. Neat, documented. Each one with a date and an amount and a corresponding note in Noel's handwriting on a separate sheet where Sebastien had obtained records I didn't yet understand and didn't need to. My son had taken my savings with the kind of patient, methodical discipline I had spent his entire childhood trying to teach him. He had finally applied it to something, just not to anything good. If you have ever watched someone use the best thing you tried to give them as the instrument against you, you understand the specific cold that moved through me right then. It is not like other kinds of cold. Then the pension. Using the enduring power of attorney I had signed at my kitchen table on the night I was too emptied out to read carefully, Noel had contacted the Alberta Public Service Pension Administrator and requested that my monthly pension payments be redirected to a secondary account he controlled. He had presented perfect documentation. They processed it without hesitation. Why wouldn't they? The paperwork was flawless. He had made sure of that. I didn't say anything. I looked at the wall behind Sebastien's head and did the arithmetic and felt something move through me that I still don't have a proper name for. Not rage, not grief, something older than both. Then the statements. He had changed the mailing address on the RRSP account to a post office box he had opened independently on Jasper Avenue. The paper statements stopped arriving at the house in Glenora. And because Noel handled the money, because that was our agreement, because I trusted him the way you trust the ground, when you've been walking on it your whole life, I never noticed they had stopped coming. I had been operating blind for over a year. The man who switched off the lights had been sitting at my kitchen table eating the meals I made and telling me how much he worried about me. Then Sebastien slid one more page across the desk, and I knew from his face before I read a single word that this one was going to be the worst. Marguerite had kept a small savings account of her own for 30 years. Her account. Her quiet reserve built slowly over decades from tutoring she'd done on the side, from careful decisions, from the particular private financial independence that women of her generation sometimes kept for themselves and rarely talked about. It wasn't a large amount, but it was hers. It was the thing that was entirely hers. Gone. Emptied using her power of attorney on a day when she would not have known to check and would not have remembered it by evening. My son had chosen his moment with precision. I put both hands flat on that desk and looked at them for a while. Old hands. Hands that had signed off on infrastructure that was still standing after 33 years. And signed off on one exhausted Wednesday evening, on the one thing that fell. There's one more, Sebastien said. He slid the last page across slowly. It was a beneficiary change form for the RRSP, and my signature was on it. I remembered the morning I saw it. Month 7. A terrible Tuesday. Marguerite had been awake most of the night, confused, frightened, and by morning I was running on nothing. Noel arrived with coffee and a small stack of papers and said, "Just routine account housekeeping, Dad. Financial year-end admin. I've sorted it. Sign here and here." I signed without reading. Buried in that stack was a form that removed Blythe and our grandchildren entirely from the RRSP beneficiary designation and replaced them with Noel. My own hand, my own pen, my own son. And Sebastien wasn't finished. For months he told me Noel had been making quiet remarks. At family gatherings, on the phone with relatives in Calgary, after church, things like, "Dad's really struggling. I'm not sure he's coping as well as he thinks. Someone needs to be watching this more closely." The kind of remarks that, on their own, sound like concern. Stacked together over months in the right ears, they build something. An elder law colleague Sebastien had consulted recognized it immediately. Noel was laying the groundwork for a guardianship application. If he could have me declared mentally incapable by a court, and he had been carefully, patiently constructing that narrative in the minds of people around us for months, he would be appointed my legal guardian. Every illegal transfer would fall under his legal authority. Everything I still owned would pass into his control without question. He wasn't only taking my money. He was building a structure around me, one worried comment at a time, designed to hold me in place permanently. I sat in that chair on the 7th floor and looked at my daughter's husband, this quiet man I had eaten Sunday dinner with for 11 years, the one nobody would have pointed to at a party, and I felt something shift inside my chest into a place it has not come back from since. "How did you find it?" I asked him. "Routine compliance review," he said. The withdrawal pattern flagged a structuring alert. I pulled the file, saw your name, closed my office door and didn't speak to a soul until I had everything. My phone lit up on the desk. Blythe. Sebastien put it on speaker. Her voice was the voice of a woman holding herself in one piece by an act of pure will. She said Marguerite was fine, the grandchildren were settled, Noel was still there, asking after me, performing his concern to a room that was watching him more carefully than he knew. Then she went quiet for a moment. "Dad," she said. Mom just asked Noel to sit beside her. She patted his arm. She told him he was a good boy. She said she was proud of him. Nobody spoke. The three of us just held that sentence. I thought about what it had cost Blythe to stand in that kitchen and hear it. She had spent years defending her brother. To me. To her own doubts. To the relatives who sometimes raised an eyebrow. She had extended him grace past every reason not to because she believed that was what family meant. And he had used that grace as cover. Sebastien asked me quietly, almost to himself, "What do you want to do, Rex?" Here is the thing about being 68 years old, sitting in an empty office tower on a Sunday night in October, with $14,000 to your name and the full weight of everything pressing down through every bone. You have two roads. You can be loud. You can call your son right now and let every true and terrible thing in you come out. You can be fire. Or you can be something colder, something that actually helps her. I thought about the home in Lessard, about the garden courtyard, about Marguerite in her blue cardigan, laughing at a story she'd told me a dozen times, and meaning it every single time. I said, I want every closed before he knows one is open. Not for me, for her. Sebastien nodded. He already had a plan, honestly. He had been waiting 3 months for me to be in that chair, and he had not wasted those months. If that had been me 30 years ago, my father's son, the man I was before Marguerite, taught me patience. I don't know if I could have sat still. I think I'd have found Noel that night. But I had learned slowly, over a long marriage to a remarkable woman, that the fire only feels like strength for about a minute. It doesn't protect anyone. There is something they don't tell you about justice. The movies promise you a moment, a confrontation, a reckoning. You grow up believing that when your turn comes, it will feel like something releasing, like a door finally opening. What they don't tell you is that when it's your own child, it doesn't feel like victory. It feels like a surgery you had to authorize on yourself. Correct, necessary, and permanent. Monday morning I was in the office of an estate and elder law lawyer named Patricia Sherwood, 12 minutes from the house in Glenora, Sebastien's referral. She had been practicing elder law in Edmonton for 22 years. She went through every page Sebastien had given her the way a surgeon examines an imaging report. Methodical. Seeing exactly what had to come out and in what order. By noon, the enduring power of attorney Noel held over me and over Marguerite had been formally revoked. Filed at the land titles office. Effective immediately. My son lost all legal access to both our accounts before he sat down to his Monday lunch. He had no idea. By Wednesday, Patricia had filed an emergency application to reverse the beneficiary designation. Blythe and our grandchildren were restored. Noel was removed. He still had no idea. By the end of that week, Sebastien's compliance department had submitted a formal referral to the RCMP's Financial Crimes Unit, and the case file, 4 months in the building, was in the hands of a staff sergeant named Ouellette. Sebastien told me later that Ouellette said it was the cleanest file he'd received from a private source in his career. Sebastien just thanked him and moved on. That's who he is. Then Noel came by the house. He brought dinner from a place he knew I liked over on White Avenue. He sat with Marguerite while her show was on. He straightened up the kitchen without being asked. He poured me a tea and asked how I was feeling since the scare at dinner. Much better, I said. Feeling like myself again. Just needed a good night's sleep. You've got to take care of yourself, Dad. He said it with that same warm, easy certainty. I worry about you more than you know. I looked at my son across my kitchen. I thought about Patricia Sherwood's office. I thought about Marguerite's account, 40 years of careful saving, emptied in an afternoon. I thought about the remarks he'd been making behind my back, one stone at a time, building a wall around me. I picked up my tea. I said, you know what, Noel, you're right. Starting right now, I'm going to pay very close attention to everything. He nodded and looked satisfied. He had no idea what was already moving in the dark around him. I have to be honest about something because I promised myself I would tell this whole story, and not just the parts that make me look good or him look like a monster. I don't think Noel woke up one morning deciding to destroy his parents. I think it started smaller than that. I think he told himself he was entitled to something for coming home. I think he looked at that account and reasoned that the money was going to vanish into care home costs anyway. That he was the one doing the actual work. That he was owed. I think every transfer had a story he constructed for himself. And every story made the next one easier to tell. That is what frightens me most. Not that he was evil. That he was a man who reasoned his way there, one comfortable step at a time, and ended up somewhere he couldn't have imagined at the beginning. Most people who do something like this are not what we picture when we imagine wrongdoing. They are people we know, people we loved. The following Saturday I called him. Son, I feel so much better. Come for dinner Sunday. Bring something. I want us all together. He arrived at 6 with a bottle of something from a good wine shop on 124th Street and his widest smile. The table was set with care. Marguerite was in her blue cardigan. She was having a beautiful evening. She told a story from 30 years back that made Blythe laugh out loud. A real laugh, the kind you can't produce on purpose. Blythe sitting at that table with her mother's voice in her ears and 4 months of her brother's actions in her bones, holding everything in one piece out of pure love and discipline. Sebastien beside her, quiet, steady, completely unreadable to anyone who didn't know what he had built over those months. And Noel at the head of the table, generous, laughing, filling glasses. The son who had come home when his parents needed him, performing it for an audience of exactly 0 people who believed it anymore. The food was good. The pretending was almost convincing. And then there was a knock at the front door. I got up. I walked across my own floors, through my own house, through 33 years of a life I had built with Marguerite, and I opened the door. Two plainclothes officers from the RCMP Financial Crimes Unit. Calm, unhurried, paperwork in order. I had spoken with them 4 days before. They knew exactly where they were and exactly who they had come for. I heard Noel go quiet mid-sentence behind me. I stepped aside. The officers came in and I watched my son's face in the moment he understood. There was no guilt first, not even in that moment. His eyes moved fast across the room, to me, to Sebastien, to Blythe, to the door. Looking for something that wasn't there. There was no exit. Every door was closed. Blythe stood up slowly. She had spent a week deciding what she wanted to say. She had written it and cut it and stripped it back until what was left was the true thing. She didn't raise her voice. She said, "Noel, I need you to look at Mom before you leave this house." The room went completely still. Noel looked at Marguerite. Marguerite looked back at her son with nothing in her face but open, uncomplicated warmth. She didn't understand what was happening around her. She thought perhaps that he was leaving early the way he sometimes did after a family dinner, and she wasn't quite ready for the evening to be over. She lifted her hand and gave him the small, slow wave she gives when someone she loves is heading for the door. "Good night, my love," she said softly. "You're such a good boy, you always have been. Come back soon, let that land." Because in that one moment, Marguerite's illness did the cruelest and most merciful thing I have ever witnessed. It kept her. It held her somewhere safe, on the gentle side of understanding, where her son's name was still clean and her heart was still whole, and she would wave him goodbye with love intact and never, not once, not for a single moment for the rest of her life, understand what he had taken from her. He would never have to watch her face change. Her mind would carry him unchanged, warm, forever. He would never earn that mercy, and he would never lose it either. Then Blythe spoke, quiet and clear. "She'll believe that until the end," she said. "Her mind will keep you safe from ever seeing her understand what you did. You'll never have to watch that happen. But I'll know, Dad will know. And every withdrawal you made while he was up before dawn giving her medication, every form you slid across the table while he was too exhausted to read, every Sunday you sat at this table, and let him say grace and mean it. I know all of it. And I am going to spend whatever time I have left making sure both of them are taken care of. Not because anyone is asking me to. Because that is what it actually looks like to love someone in this family." They walked Noel out the front door of the house in Glenora, and Marguerite watched him go and waved cheerfully from her chair, warm and present, and certain that her son was simply heading home after a lovely family dinner, the way he always did, the way she would always remember. Noel pleaded guilty. The file Sebastien had built was too complete, too clean for any defense to find footing in. Elder financial abuse, criminal fraud, structuring under the Proceeds of Crime and Terrorist Financing Act. Restitution was ordered. The money comes back slowly the way it left, in pieces. Some of it has not come back and likely won't. I have made what peace I can with that. Some days making peace is the most a person can do, but Marguerite's care is protected. Patricia Sherwood found mechanisms I had not known existed. Emergency planning instruments available under Alberta's adult guardianship legislation that could shield her even with the account as depleted as it was. The home on the quiet crescent in Lessard, the one I had walked through alone and stood in the garden of and tried to imagine her there, is still within reach. She is going to be all right. Not the life we planned in every detail. Not perfect in the way you picture it when you are young and making plans and believe that careful is enough to protect you from everything. But all right. And right now all right is the whole world to me. Here is what I would put in your hands if I could reach through this and hand you something real. The danger almost never looks like danger. It looks like help arriving. It looks like someone lifting the thing you can't carry one more step without falling. And the mistake most of us make, the one I made, is believing that exhaustion is a sufficient reason to stop reading what we sign. It is not. It is never sufficient. No matter how depleted you are, no matter how much you trust the person in front of you, the reading does not stop. So before you do anything else tonight, I want you to do one thing. If there is anyone managing your finances, your accounts, your paperwork, anyone at all, even someone you would put your hand in a fire for, set up a way to see your own accounts on your own device that answers only to you. Not because you doubt them. Because trust and oversight were never meant to be in conflict. You can have both. You must have both. And here is the question I want you to sit with. If everything you had built, quietly, carefully over a lifetime of early mornings and late nights and choices that cost you something, if all of it were taken not by a stranger but by someone whose name you had given yourself to love, would you be able to choose the quiet road, the patient one? The one that takes months and costs you everything you have left of your composure, because it is the only road that actually protects her? I don't know that I had it in me. I just knew that she needed me to find it. Tell me in the comments. Type a 1 if you think I did right, choosing patience and the legal road over the confrontation. Type a 2 if you think you would have gone straight to him that night and said every true word out loud. Type a 3 if you honestly don't know, because that is the most honest answer there is, and the one I respect most. And tell me where you're listening from. I read these, every one of them. Tell me what time it is where you are tonight. If someone you trusted has ever turned that trust into a weapon against you, tell me. You will not be the only one in those comments, not even close. If this reached you, if any part of it did, do an old man a kindness and subscribe and hit like so that more people who need to hear this can find their way to it. We tell real, honest, difficult family stories on this channel, and your being here is the only reason we can keep telling them. I will see you on the next one. Thank you, genuinely, for being here. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined to create original content. Any resemblance to actual persons or events is coincidental.